Hello! Today I wanted to talk about trauma. Once again, I am somebody who's very versed in trauma, very wicked experienced in it. It's first and second hand as well. My entire family's pretty fucked up from trauma, from a one common person. And then of course on top of that also a cult known as Jehovah's Witnesses. By the way, I don't know if I said this in the beginning, my name's Danny, and of course I am currently still going through EMDR, and maybe in the future I'll also go into neurofeedback. I would love to do neurofeedback. I was actually told by the way, one of the co-creators of both neurofeedback and EMDR that neurofeedback is literally explicitly made for people that match me to a fucking T. Including my response to trauma and stuff like that. Which is just crazy. That was my first and so far only experience with neurofeedback. Was it turned out I literally met one of the two guys who literally invented these things and created both forms of therapy. Crazy cool. This dude works, his name's John. He works in Lake Oswego for a neurofeedback clinic. It's really, really freaking cool. So he's actually local to here. Just awesome. If you're familiar with the book, by the way, The Body Meets the Score, everybody who has read it and does own the book and has listened to it, like my sister and my mom, can testify that it is such an important and such a valuable tool, resource, and book to read, especially if you have been through trauma or you know, or especially I would say, if you're in a relationship with somebody who has baggage, who has trauma, who has triggers. Maybe they don't realize they have trauma, but they clearly have triggers, which isn't mutually exclusive to trauma, but it is almost exclusive to trauma. I highly recommend you check out that book. The author, the man behind that book, is the other guy to John that created neurofeedback and EMDR. It's really cool, and especially if you want to learn about both of them in detail, but in simple, easy to understand terms. Again, that book, The Body Meets the Score, is a fantastic recommend to read and to listen to, or to be have read to you in whatever fashion and way. So yeah, I am currently going through therapy still. Obviously, I still have plenty of way to go, but I've also made a stupid amount of progress, and the therapy has actually helped me way more than even I feel like it has, which is really cool because I'm slowly coming into realization of how much it's helped me so far, how much it even makes me feel better, and how much less triggerable I am, which is really cool. I definitely still have triggers though, because again, I still have a lot of work and lessons to learn. Already just spent like 5 minutes, not even getting into the specific topic about trauma that I wanted to. So I want you to take a deep breath and just take a step back for a moment. Relax yourself a bit. And then put yourself in the shoes. And this is for whether you've been in trauma or in these situations or not, by the way, but it's especially for people who might not have that experience, or at least not enough of it to really understand and grasp what the reality of trauma is and how basically manipulative and abusive people and groups utilize it. So it's going to show in the end exactly what abuse looks like from the traumatized perspective. So from the victim perspective. So take a step into the shoes of somebody who's been through a lot of trauma, with somebody who's very controlling, narcissistic, and thus arrogant and egotistical. Dictatorial is another word you could use for controlling, and is very vindictive, spiteful, angered, hateful, cruel, and mean, where they just tear you to shreds verbally. They just absolutely eviscerate and annihilate, obliterate, exterminate your character, your content of your character, who you are, your sense of self, any form of self-confidence, self-value, self-image, self-preservation, autonomy, anything like that. And put yourself in the shoes of somebody in that situation. Let's say an example, one that the first one that always comes to mind for me, ironically, is not something I'm personally experienced with. However, it is one where you put yourself in the shoes of a spouse, so a significant other, a partner in a relationship, a serious relationship. So you could either be the man or the woman. It doesn't matter because both are heavily abused. Although I know it's probably easier to envision yourself as a woman in that situation, at least here in the Western world, because again, men have a negative reputation, especially with women, as the more abusive and aggressive types. So, but whichever one works for you, that's what I'm saying. So whichever one you naturally find yourself flowing into and seeing yourself as, that works. Another case, an example, if that doesn't feel right or isn't really forming for you, and you don't really feel like you can put yourself in those shoes, is someone like, say, any age of somebody who is either adolescent, so somebody who is a teen or younger, or a spouse still works actually in that situation, so one of the parents, or maybe you're also living with, as adults, you're living with some family. And it's just very, like I said, very controlling, very mean, cruel, eviscerates, just completely destroys your sense of self, your confidence, your image, how you feel about yourself, all of that. Because they just demean you. They attack you in that way. Sometimes it can be physically abusive as well. They love to use threats. Love to scare you, basically. Especially if you challenge them by questioning, let's say you start to question them on some of their things they tell you. Like, why shouldn't I just leave? I'm going to leave. And all of a sudden their aggression kicks in. They get a lot more aggressive. They get a lot more intimidating. And they start to threaten you. Not just physically imposing themselves or physically threatening to hit you or something, but verbally threatening you too. Just being menacing overall. They're trying to strike fear into you to make sure you stay. They do not want you to have any confidence or feeling of urge to leave. They'll give you every reason in the book they can come up with as an excuse as to why, and they'll try to make it sometimes altruistic. But for the most part, not even the most part, 100% of the time with these people or these groups, why they say these things and they do this, like I said, is to keep you with them, under their thumb, their iron boot on your throat. They're trying to keep you under their possession and control. That's really why it is. They are reacting because they do not want to risk losing somebody they have controlled and destroyed, freeing themselves. So they make you fear for your life a lot of times. And if it's not that and threatening your life sometimes, whether directly or indirectly, they'll still absolutely destroy you while making you fear in some, usually a long list of ways, ever leaving and going out on your own, freeing yourself from the shackles that is their abuse. Obviously, the reason why they do that is because, again, they don't want to lose somebody that they've already completely molded into putty that they can play with, that they can control and dictate to, that is now, and this was also the intention, the long-term abuse, is to make you reliant on them. Because again, that's another reason why it keeps you there. So, a lot of times when you try to leave, one of the main threats they use is, of course, where are you going to go? Who do you know? You think your friend's going to take you in? You think your neighbor's going to take you in? They're not going to take you in. And they'll start to tear you down again and tell you how insignificant and unimportant you are, how much of a nuisance and a problem you are, how nobody really actually respects or likes you, how you don't really have value, how, you really think that they care about you like that, where they'd actually take, no, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. Absolutely no one. No, because you're such an insignificant speck What have you done with your life? What have you done with yourself? Do you even have friends? I bet you don't. Where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do? Do you have job experience? Because a lot of times these people do not let you have job experience. Do you? No, you don't. Do you have a car? No. Can you afford anything on your own? No. Do you have a job? Maybe you do, but can you afford anything? Okay, well, no, okay. The fucker is wrong with you? What are you thinking? Why are you so selfish? And then start in again on destroying you, tearing you apart, little itty piece by little itty piece, just eviscerating you. Because again, this is the psychology of how a manipulator, an abuser works to ensure you stay put. But there's another reason why they love to do this, and it's because they know that God forbid you get out there and you do make a life for yourself, there's a strong chance that you might report them. And especially if there's anyone else under their abusive control, like say a child, a sibling, adult or not, a grandparent, your mom or dad, then you might actually expose them and report them. And see, now you really fucked them over, because now they really have to put on, they have to invent another brand new mask to wear when the police come and the investigators come. And they can't let themselves crack. The problem is they don't have any time to formulate this character of theirs. You've really fucked them over. But they're really cocky, so they're impervious. It's kind of how they think. Even though deep down inside they're fucking terrified and they're cowardly people. That's why they use this power and control dynamic to abuse you. Because the only thing they're more scared of than losing you is being exposed for their crimes. That's because that proves they're cowards. They're terrified of accountability. They're terrified of being revealed their true colors. They're terrified of not having any friends or have nobody trust them. It's the irony of it. But when it comes down to especially groups, can you think of any groups, any kind at all, that uses the same kind of tactics, that talks down to you in that way? Because in the end, it doesn't matter if it's a single person or if it's a group. Because if any of these things fit in a group that you can think of, then it is the same as that person. It is still the entirely abusive and is still entirely manipulative, controlling. And that, therefore, is traumatizing to anybody who goes through it. And as a result, everybody gets trauma from it. They get triggers from it and from similar situations. Thus why they end up impulsively reacting emotionally to a lot of different things so strongly, because they have a bad experience that is triggering their trauma. Now, obviously, I'm sure if you've looked at my channel at all, whether this is your first video or not, you know that I am an ex-JW, and they are in fact a cult, and they are, well, that's exactly how that group operates, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video, to have you put yourself in those shoes and give you a lot of examples, or at least a few simple examples, while you're in those shoes, of exactly what abuse looks like and can look like. I should also say and or can look like. And in this case, it's very manipulative abuse. Specifically, this is what you would call sociopathy or sociopathy, depending on how you want to say it. So this is what constitutes sociopaths. These are people that are capable of human emotion. That's what separates them from psychopaths, because psychopaths, so something means psychopathic, somebody who is a psychopath is incapable of human emotion. That is the difference between them and sociopaths, where sociopaths are capable of it, but sociopaths still otherwise use almost all the same tendencies and traits that psychopaths do. They're hyper controlling, they are hyper aggressive, they are very cruel and very mean. They are just the nastiest people. But the worst part about both of them is that they masquerade. They form and wear masks, and they wear them when they're in public, when they're around certain groups of people, when they're around strangers, when they're around coworkers, when they're around each other, so on. They have a bunch of different masks that they change out depending on who is their audience that day, that moment, that night, that hour. So that they're perfectly and very well meticulously manicured so that they appear a very specific way depending on their audience. And why does it depend on their audience? These changes. It's because everybody relates to and or likes and gravitates towards and trusts different people with different traits. So naturally, there's a lot of similarities because they always have a charismatic character, so a lot of charisma, machismo, in their characters, which makes them well-liked amongst all the people they've been lying to and pretending that they're these people that are really their masks. Everybody has a somewhat different set of expectations and a different set of things that they, whether they consciously realize it or not, prefer, that make them connect and trust much more quickly and stronger in somebody than not. And that's another way they actually manipulate people, is they're manipulating these people so they can have their audience, which works kind of like having an alibi. Because think about it. In this case, quantity is quality for their defense. So if you, one of their victims, manages to actually get the fucking confidence and the balls to finally say enough of this shit and go report them to the police and or go and get themselves help and get free of these people and actually expose them for who they really are behind the veil, behind the curtain, behind the closed doors, their true colors. They can then use that quantity, that sheer amount of people on the outside, the external, the outside of that sheath, of that curtain, of that veil, of those doors and walls. They can use their reputation with this quantity of people in their groups, in their workplace, in their environment, in their neighborhood, you name it. They can then bring them up to use them to their advantage in a defense. So inevitably, if police go into a full investigation and they actually say, inquire and ask the people that know them, and then that way, when that happens, guess what happens? The likelihood is the investigation will side with the master manipulator because of all the masks they wore. That's another form of their manipulation. And it's actually another way that they try to fuck you up mentally and emotionally and keep you under their control behind those curtains, behind those walls, because they know if they can really ensure to you and really instill it into you with that fear and that aggression that nobody's going to believe you. Who's going to believe you? Nobody's going to believe you. I have the whole world out there who loves me, knows I'm such a great person. I never hurt a fly. I'm so incredibly charitable and helpful. I'm fun. I'm funny. I'm always happy. Nobody's going to believe you. Not a fucking soul will believe you. And then you're just going to be known as the liar that you are. And then no one's going to trust you. And then you really have nobody. Nobody will fucking like you. Nobody will trust you. Nobody will ever want you in their life. You'll be alone. You're being really fucking selfish and stupid right now. You're playing right into their cards. That's the fucking point. But that's why they would also do that. Because they do not want you to have any confidence. They do not want you to take that chance that you can actually prove it. That they're horrible people. That's the point of that manipulation. It actually is literally dual. It's double-edged sword manipulation, because it's manipulating the public to their advantage while using that then manipulation of the public to manipulate you further, so that you never ever have any confidence, you never have any value, you never have any trust. You're just literally at their complete and utter control and mercy like putty. That's the fucking point of why they do this, because they know what they're doing. They're very calculated pieces of shit, and they don't care literally whatsoever. They don't care at all about literally anyone else but themselves. This is why they also have a perfectly manicured image to the outside world. It doesn't matter what their image is, because they can show you true colors because you're under their control. You're fucked. You're never getting away. You're never getting out of this. But everyone else, got to put on that show. It's absolutely royally fucked. So it's always putting on appearances, aka vanity, aka being shallow. They are trying to do everything they can to project a certain energy and a certain attitude, a certain set of traits, a certain charisma, and everything else, so that they always get their way. And again, that's why I then would like to ask you once more, can you think of any people groups, that employ this same kind of tactics and talk? Because I bet you can. And again, as I said before, just a little bit ago, that I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness, because this is exactly one of the groups you should think of. Because that's exactly what they do to not only get your hooks in you to get you to become one of them, but then to keep you in and never let you escape. They want you permanently enchained to them. They will fearmonger as much as they can, while making sure that they do that, especially after they have completely ripped you of your self-identity, of your self-image, of your self-confidence, of your trust in yourself, of your will to freely think for yourself, to question anything that they tell you cannot question, so on and so forth. They do not want to allow that, because that means, well, A, you'll easily be able to completely deconstruct their doctrines and prove they're a bunch of fucking frauds, that they got all sorts of shit fucked up and wrong, and a lot of their doctrine is not even based on biblical text. It's actually based on random bullshit. Furthermore, it obviously would do bad for their image, and it means they lose another member, aka they lose another person under their control. And it means it's another person who risks destroying that pristine little public image that they feel like they have to maintain, and that they perfectly manicured and somehow still have without all these cracks in it, even though right now it's blatantly clear around the world. It's basically almost completely fallen off their face. But that's how master manipulator people and groups work, is they genuinely are so desperate in their cores. They are so desperate to maintain this very specific amount of control and this very specific image of themselves, that once it starts to completely crumble off of them and their true colors just become who they really are underneath to everybody, they will continue to further convince themselves of now a complete delusion that no, it hasn't fallen off my face. Nobody knows yet, or at least not enough people know yet, that I'm actually this horrible, evil, eviscerating of other people piece of shit who just wants complete power and control over people, because I lack that over myself and in my own life in past. And that's why I became the sociopathic piece of shit, is because I'm going to now do exactly what I this whole power control and manipulation thing, because what the fuck else am I supposed to do? Because that's my gap. That's my lack. I don't have this anywhere in my life. I don't have this in myself. I never had it. And so I really have to have it. So I'm going to now do it to other people, just like it was done to me, so that way then I can now supposedly have this weird form of confidence and leadership and charisma and fill in that gap with what I didn't have by getting control over others, even though it's really the fact that they don't have control over themselves or their own life. They never had. Not all, but most sociopaths are that way. where they themselves have actually gone through a lot of abuse and trauma themselves, and they just basically become exactly what they experienced. Not all, but a lot of them are. There's actually about 4 or 5 dominant types of almost said socialism, what the fuck? Of sociopathy. Jesus Christ. Oh boy, the right wingers of the world are gonna absolutely run away with that one. Freudian slip, Freud's always right. Sigmund was a fucked up person. Good story. Anyway, that dude was really fucking twisted. Speaking of psychiatry, fuck, Sigmund Freud was a weird motherfucker. He was a weird dude. He had a lot of weird ideas. I don't even think he was fully stable, to be completely honest with you. But different story. In the end, the point is that there are a lot of groups, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, obviously. There's a lot of other groups that use these tactics. And actually, a lot of them throughout history have always been, well, political groups. Especially governments. It's one of the oldest tactics in the book, because this is why Adolf Hitler, and thus Nazi Germany, employed the exact same kind of tactics. One of the other things they always did, and this is like the go-to throughout history for dictatorships, including, of course, Nazi Germany, is that they use repetition, and specifically they use emphatic repetition. Every single time they repeat, and it's always repeat, they increase the amount of drama in their emphasis every single time. But they also do it with extreme, absolute confidence that this is absolutely the factual truth. And they just keep doing this over and over and over again. And the more they do it, and the more drama, so desperate, they make it sound, the more it also stokes up those primal emotions of things like fear, confusion, insecurity. And if you can especially tap into that primal mechanism, well, it's called primal for a reason. We don't usually have control, if at all, over any of our primal mechanisms. Again, this is why they're called primal, also known as reptilian or whatever else. This is the caveman genes. This is the things from proto-human. This is the things from however you want to brand it. It's just a built-in mechanism into all living beings, and in our case, we have a lot of these things, including actually when it's associated with trauma. This is actually why this is a good point to make, actually, even though it's a little sidetrack. I probably won't get to my point before because I probably already forgot it. But this actually was a perfect accidental entry into another piece for trauma that's actually really important for context and for people to gain even better understanding of trauma, including whether it's in themselves or in each other, and others, doesn't matter. And that is that one of those primal mechanisms is what I would call the blackout gene. Basically, if there's something that happens that's really intense and overwhelming, it's usually something very traumatic, you black out. And maybe you don't actually black out in the sense that we mean that these days, which is that you pass out, but you literally have a complete black void in your memory bank. There's nothing there. It's just all this, like, you know what you last remember happened, and then all of a sudden, there's this completely void, null and void, empty spot in your memory. And then suddenly, whenever somebody addresses that, or you come to or whatever, and now you have memories from that point. But there's this thing in between where you have this gap where it's completely blank. It's just a black void of nothingness. You blacked out whatever happened during that period in time. That's why the memory blackouts happen, is because that primal mechanism kicked in to save you and defend you and your life from whatever the trauma was. Because genuinely, trauma is that intense for most people, most living things, most of the time, is that there's literally a fucking primitive mechanism that we have zero control over that will literally make you black out. And usually with that is in lockstep with it, shock, traumatic shock, right? This is how especially most people develop their PTSD, is they have blackouts of their memory banks along with that shock. as that period where they can have a complete blank in their memory, that's the traumatic event that removes itself from your memory. Whereas, as that, in the moment it's happening, traumatic stuff starts and your blackout happens, you're going to shock, traumatic shock, which itself is another primal mechanism to try to get you to basically, because you're so overwhelmed with too much adrenaline and everything else, to almost shut down, to again go into self-preservation mode. They work hand in hand. So, no, not everybody goes into shock. Very few people don't, but that's where that comes into, is it's this primal mechanism we have zero control over, where it's literally your primitive brain, your reptilian brain, immediately takes over completely for you to protect you and your life from whatever this threat was that was traumatic. That's the craziest part of it. It's literally that simple. That's what happened. The thing is that there's also the aspect, and it usually happens again with the people who have blackout memories. Not always. Some people just permanently have that void in there. But there's a lot of people who have these blackout memories, and then differing speeds, differing people, different situations and times and traumas. But they'll have the memories slowly fill in and the blanks. But almost always they're confirmed to be warped or even outright fully fabricated, where your brain created and invented most of those memories. Some of them have, aspects of reality and truth of what you experienced in that traumatic event in it, like little pieces of truth sprinkled in there, but most of it's still false. Most of it's either hyper embellished and exaggerated, or it is just completely fucked and wonky. It's just really broken. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. There's sometimes a lack of connection, a lack of coherency, whatever it is, or it's just whack. Just wanted to throw that out there as well for the trauma thing, for more context, so that you can be a little more educated in case you didn't actually know that already. I'm thankful that my memories always stay exactly the same, and they're always hyper detailed. I have a very video and photographic memory, so I'm very thankful for that, to where my brain doesn't black me out. And even the most traumatic experiences I've lived through, I'm very thankful for that. It would actually make it a lot worse, I think, for me. Just because you can't learn much from your trauma at that point, and also you can't exactly, well, in either way, learning from it. So you can't learn from it in the sense of okay, now I know what it feels like to have been through that specific situation that traumatized me, so I know how to avoid it next time, say an example, right? So there's that way. And then there's the going through therapy way of learning, where you're learning from that experience so that then you're facing it, you're accepting it, you're acknowledging it, you're finding a little more details in how maybe it's affecting your life currently and how it has affected your life and how it's changed certain aspects about you, or why it's caused you to be, say, more defensive or less trusting or more introverted or whatever it is. And then reframe it, right? This is especially things true for EMDR and neurofeedback, is that it's reframing it so that way you're not getting rid of it. It's always going to be a memory because you experienced it. So it's never going to go away. But what it does is it allows you to get rid of the trauma. And so rid of all the emotions associated with it, so that now when you look back, it's just like any other memory. There's no emotions whatsoever tied to it. It's blank. It's just the experience itself, and that's it. So you can literally look at it as a matter of fact, very neutrally, and just be like, this happened, this is why, this is what went through, this is what it caused me to be like, and I have to respond, and my triggers and stuff like that. And, I went through therapy, reframed it. Now it doesn't bug me at all. It has literally has no impact on me. That's the ultimate goal, which is again why, as I keep saying, I cannot encourage people enough to go through therapy. And so yes, whether you want to see it or believe it or not, because there's so much cognitive dissonance in people who are actively experiencing trauma, especially those that are born into it, or even more so those that are just that well indoctrinated that don't realize it. And that's why with cults like the LDS, aka Latter-day Saints, Mormons, Scientology, oh yeah, and of course Jehovah's Witnesses, J-dubs, There's so many people within it that are still dedicated to it, thinking they're not traumatized at all. There's no traumatization, there's no manipulation or anything like that. That's just apostasy. That's this, that, other things, which is part of the manipulation, by the way, and the programming of your mind to get you to reject anything that doesn't agree with and is anything not positive about the group that you're a part of. Is that, oh, it's apostasy, which again, with Jehovah's Witnesses, apostasy is basically the most like intensely negative label you can get. I would almost argue it seems like to them it's almost slightly, ever so slightly, by half a horsehair worse than being satanic or of Satan is demons, as they love to specifically say that. It's just crazy to me. But yeah, so again, that's why those groups, like Jehovah's Witnesses, are in fact manipulating you actively, and why they have clearly successfully indoctrinated you with their manipulation. And they're succeeding with their manipulation still by keeping you in, especially if you're physically in and mentally in. So I guess that'd be PME. Whereas there's some people who are still kind of stuck in there and they feel stuck and they won't make the move to actually fully leave physically and make that jump of bravery because the manipulation is technically still working on you. If you're a PMO, a physically in, mentally out JW. For that very reason, that's proof to you their manipulation is still technically working with you. Your indoctrination is still pretty damn deep in you because you are too scared, which means they are succeeding with that manipulation, using the fear to take the deep breath and go for it and remove yourself completely. That's exactly where they want you. Oh, they actually don't want you to be mentally out at all, but at least you're not fully mentally out. Because if you were, you'd also be physically out. You wouldn't be a JW at all anymore. So maybe that helps you if you're in that situation. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not entirely sure. But at least you now have that perspective so you understand what's going on there. And it could be the worst case and the most difficult thing in the world and throughout anyone's lives when you're actually so well under the thumb, under the full control and indoctrination and, of a master manipulator, of a psychopath or a sociopath, of a very abusive person and or group. God forbid you have both. Hi. I do have that experience, don't I? Whoops. And I'm born into it, which arguably can be worse. Thank God I've always been hyper autonomous. Good God, that probably saved my life more than I realize. It's the most difficult thing for people that are in that situation to realize and be shown that they are being actively manipulated and that they haven't seen it truthfully at all. Like deep down inside, everybody knows when they're being completely fucked over and fucked up, especially with manipulative pieces of shit, and they're in a dangerous situation. At your deepest core, and primally, let alone otherwise, you know. That's why your health gets so fucked up, or your heart rate is higher than normal, or your blood pressure problems and all that stuff, because it's called stress. You are traumatized, whether you believe it or not. And people in those situations, that's why they're so fucking irritating sometimes to try to help and deal with. Because, and there's so many, unfortunately, there's so many cases of people in super toxic, hyper manipulative relationships, whether it's, a woman or a man. Usually, again, it's easier for people to think of incidents with women being the ones that are in a hyper abusive relationship with a man. So whichever ones you relate to better. The idea is of the point here is that that's why a lot of times women will go their entire lives dedicated and they truly love that man. Or in this case, sometimes it's the reverse again. So it's that man truly loves their woman, and they only treat me like this and act like this because they care. They're really protective, and that's really admirable or whatever. They'll come up with any excuse they can to defend the person. Unfortunately. And it's such a common thing. I know we can all think of incidents like this, whether it's somebody we knew or it's a neighbor or it just happened in your town, or it's a headline or whatever else, or it's in books, you know, documented, whatever. It's a thing we can all probably relate to and understand. And like, yeah, I know this. I've at least heard of it once, one incident like that. I'm like, yeah, why do you think they're stuck there? Because they don't know any better. But on top of that, even at their core, if their deepest core, they do know better, they're scared. They're way too fucking paranoid and scared because that motherfucker successfully manipulated and completely decimated, destroyed, eviscerated, obliterated, annihilated that person, the actual person themselves, the true person, the entirety that what made that person a person, they've completely eviscerated from existence. It doesn't exist anymore. They completely destroyed any self-image, any self-identity, any autonomy, any confidence, any, literally anything. They've destroyed absolutely everything that makes a unique living being a unique living being. Those people are so fucking empty and hollow, and they don't know anything else anymore. All they know is that manipulation and that abuse. All they know is that control. All they know is that reliance on that abuser, and that's it. They don't know anything else, and that's why it's so wicked difficult to get through to them that this is not okay. It's not healthy. It's beyond criminal, and it's potentially deadly. And not only that, it's like, why would you torture yourself like this? And you know, they'll never be gotten through to because they're just, no matter how much you hack away and how many people try to help intervene and be like, dude, you really need to see the light. Like, this is not, you need to get out of this, you know. And you have so many allies and people ready to jump into action to protect your literal fucking life if God forbid it comes to that. But like, you got to get out of there. And sometimes it never succeeds, and they just, the rest of their lives, however long that lasts, or however, God forbid, however it ends, usually negatively, fortunately, you know, they stay with that person, that abuser, because they're just that well indoctrinated to the extent that they're just that intensely fearful. They're that horrified and terrified. And it's not even just of like what might happen, like they'll be murdered or they'll be dismembered or they'll be whatever else by that person. It's not even so much that, it's like that, that's a huge part of it, but there's the other aspects of it that people probably don't think past the tip of their nose of to realize. Like, financially, you're fucked. When you get out, you have no place to live, you have no place to go, you probably don't have any friends, because that's how these manipulative pieces of shit work, is they dictate who you are allowed to see and not see, who's allowed to be your friend, quote unquote, and not be your friend, quote unquote, and so on and so forth. When you're allowed to go outside, when you're allowed to be alone, when you're, if you even are allowed to, God forbid, when you're allowed to walk your fucking dog, when you're allowed to eat, when you're allowed to whatever, they're really that controlling. And so they are 100% reliant on that person. They have been for so long now that they literally don't have any sense of self, or any sense of thinking for themselves, or any sense of confidence, or any sense of autonomy. They're just terrified of literally every thought that enters their head, especially considering things like going away, because then if they can't get any further than that, these are the things that comes up like that, besides potentially being murdered. They don't know anyone, and of course they're not going to trust anyone, because reality sets in. They couldn't trust that other person either, obviously. Now what? And it might even be so twisted that in that moment they might think, how can I can't even trust the person I thought I trusted, the abuser, because they didn't protect me or save me, defend me from being taken away from home, from my protector, which is ironically is the abuser, right? Because that's how that manipulation works. I could go on forever on this topic. Like, it goes deeper than infinity can go. And infinity is itself infinite, which means perpetual. There's no end. There's no beginning and there is no end. So yeah, hopefully this video has been coherent enough and simple enough described that hopefully you've learned something from this. You got some sort of value out of it. And obviously I would appreciate it if you'd click the like button. It takes a fraction of a second. It's free. And it lets me know you enjoyed or got value out of it. And feel free to share your experiences down below. I know that can be especially intimidating, besides the fact it's very personal. But again, you know, therapy is a huge thing, and that can technically be very therapeutic, because the more people that see this, especially that have experienced trauma, and also especially therapists themselves, psychiatrists, psychologists themselves, whatever, right? Healers. These people, if they see this, they can then go to the comments and see people's experiences and actually help each other. We can all help each other. We can all talk and share experiences and everything. And that's a beautiful thing, because though it might be awkward and really fucking potentially paranoid, I know it's not a word, I always use it though, so make you paranoid, in the long haul, or, you know, in the short term, in the moment, I think in long term, it can actually be a really positive benefit long term. But again, no pressure. It's up to you, including actually taking the fraction second to click the like button. But it does help a lot. It feeds the algorithm, lets you know that you got value and or you enjoyed the video, and therefore, of course, inevitably other people will too. So it pushes it a little more, not much, but enough. Comments help you more than likes, but both of them together are a great combo. And of course, sharing the video is another great way to help support me, the channel, and or the video. Yeah. I'm sure, I mean, I know everybody already knows this, but you say, feel free to do that. It's all free, including subscribing. Although I don't really recommend that. I don't know if I ever will in my life. I can do this for another 10 years, so it's not quite a decade of doing this yet on this channel, but it's about to be January 17th of next year. Will be 10 years of this channel. Fucking wild. And I could go on for another 10 years, 15 years, a quarter of a century on YouTube. And I probably still wouldn't recommend people subscribe. If you do, you'll be haunted and you'll regret your decision, probably. I feel like it. So I've had for a few years now, I've had the joke of like, subscribe to prove you too are a masochist. Because I have such high self-esteem and value. I do have a very backwards way of things I love and value. Like terms of endearment, I love it when people just call you these really creative fucking insults. It's so fun, man. I love it. I don't know why. It literally brings me so much joy to my heart. I'm kidding. My heart doesn't exist. It's a cold black spot where it should be. See you later. Stay safe out there and get therapy. Seriously, please do. There's so many different forms of therapy out there, and it is such an important, helpful tool. Even if you don't have trauma, it can be wildly effective beyond what you would actually ever expect. Just talking things through like that. There's somebody listening. It's wild how well it can help. Anyway, I'm gonna shut the fuck up now. Pinhead is about to be struck down. It's not really a good way to put that, is there? Pinhead out. I'm gonna go stick my head in a turkey. It doesn't work either. I have issues. Goodbye.